Hello there, wellness entrepreneur. Welcome back to the Well Unbound podcast. I am still going through a rebrand and I want to give you some behind the scenes, a sneak peek into how I'm navigating a new identity. I'm stepping into the CEO, a person who is stepping into a new version of myself in both my personal life and my business life, and trying to stay as authentic and real as possible, as well as just honoring my nervous system as well. So you've seen now, hopefully, the new website. If you haven't already, you can head to the show notes and check it out. You'll see the new name on Instagram. Hopefully that's changed by now as well. Again, if you can't find me, you can just head to Ignite Your Wellness Business with a UR, and it'll redirect you or give you the name of the new handle. I'm not releasing it here till it's officially changed on Instagram, but hopefully, because right now as I'm recording it, I'm waiting for my name to be released because I was holding it there. So Instagram has a 14-day window before they can release it. And I caught myself during this rebrand doing this thing where I wanted every piece of it to be perfect, every color locked, every visual changed over. I found myself sometimes procrastinating or freezing and switching over. I remember the podcast art and the podcast name. I'm like, just do it, just switch it over, just do it. And I had to do that to release Instagram. And I'm still working through it. So I still have to shift over emails. Allison at igniteyourwellness.com. That will be available for a while. Still upcoming is support at wellunbound.com. And there's some areas, for example, where I was waiting on the logo from the brand team to switch over the logo in Acuity and some areas of Kajabi and things like that. So it isn't in a tidy little bow before I released it out into the world. But some of that, me wanting to release it completely into the world in this tiny little bow, is a past nervous system response of myself that I developed as a kid to stay safe, or what my nervous system, considered safe. And that was being a chameleon. And that's what I want to talk about today, how I am attempting showing up every day and being the most authentic self that I can be here on the podcast, on Instagram, showing up, showing my wins and, yes, my flops and my failures and where I'm learning and all of that, to inspire you and know that I'm not a perfect person by any means, but I can still achieve success. And if I can do it, then you can do it too. And that is the whole inspiration for today's podcast, to keep you going. And I've always been kind of a chameleon, someone who reads the room and tidies myself up to match the room or the person in front of me. I make sure everything is buttoned up, polished. I really sometimes think about what I say to make sure that how I come across with someone is perfect. Like it's the answer that they want to hear. And it's not sometimes what I really feel, or an answer that or an activity that I might want to do, for example. Now, I've gotten so much better about this with my family, with my friends, and in my business and with my coaches over the years. But, a decade, 15 years ago, I was the yes woman. And one of the first physical therapy clinics I worked in, I had two male colleagues, and I was the low woman on the totem pole. I, for example, was the new grad, even though I had 10 years of massage experience prior to going to physical therapy school, or about that. I was still considered the new grad, the green one. And I took on that role and I allowed some bullying. I didn't speak up for myself in certain scenarios. I doubted myself in some scenarios because I wanted to be the good employee, be the, do good for the company. And I sacrificed myself and some boundaries during that process. And I have done that in other roles in my life in various ways. And now I'm really, as I come into my closer to my 50s and I review my life and sometimes ask myself, I have so much to be grateful for, but sometimes as I look around our house and the painting that needs to be done, like, how did I get here? And as I look back, it's like, okay, I can see how, because I compromised on myself and I didn't have the courage to really speak up for what I wanted, or I rushed into settling for something because I had so much fear that I couldn't create what I really wanted, or that other people would get what they wanted, but because I move slow and think slow and do things slow, that I would miss out, or it's like some kind of a version of FOMO. And so as I come into this rebrand, as I come into my 50s, and as I come into this part of my business of what I really want to create for my clients, the experience I want to create for them, the results I want to create for them, the business that I want, the mom that I want to be, the wife and partner I want to be, and who I just want to be for myself and what I want to create for myself. I really want to own this identity as someone who can fully own who she is and not make herself small or like a chameleon to avoid being judged or criticized. Because often when I feel judged or criticized, then I make it mean that I've done something wrong or I'm not worthy of something. So, for example, on social media, I used to fear being criticized or judged if I said something, back in the day about combining physical therapy and yoga. This is before there was all over a decade ago, close to 20 years ago, when there wasn't as much research on yoga and the benefits for back pain, for example, and working with a person holistically in the nervous system and looking at areas other than the back. So sometimes I was doing things outside the box most of the time, actually, because of my experience with massage and seeing results through working with the nervous system and soft myofascial release type work without being aggressive and hurting someone or causing bruising, for example. But I had a fear to say all that on the internet because I was afraid of what other colleagues, what other physical therapists might say, because it was controversial. And I was afraid that someone was going to say, oh, well, that's wrong. And what that would, my brain, make that mean about me. So I held myself back and I tried to be a chameleon on the internet where I was essentially trying to please everybody, which is fine, except my account really didn't grow fast because it wasn't really standing out to those who do resonate with wanting to help people holistically and fully and through traditional medicine or traditional methods and modalities that maybe evidence-based research hasn't caught up to yet, for example. So I've spent an enormous amount of energy over the years making sure that there was never a loose thread or something for anyone to pull to call me out, for example. And you know what I realized about the fear of being judged, for me at least? I think the reason I'm so scared to be judged is that because for a while I used to judge. And I didn't realize this consciously, but again, it was a way my nervous system used to keep me safe, where I'm like, okay, well, if I'm better or performing better or doing this better, then I can succeed. I'm not going to be left behind. I'm going to make it in the world. I was using it as evidence that I could achieve a thing, whatever it was. But the funny thing is, because I was so afraid of making it or had a fear of not making it, I even held myself so back for so long. For example, one reason I had kind of had a hunch for, in undergrad, that maybe I would want to go to physical therapy school. And I had gotten my massage license. I graduated from college and massage school in the same week, actually, when I was 21. And the reason why I didn't carry on to massage or to physical therapy school right away, even though I loved the manual work and working with people, is I thought I couldn't succeed with science. And I'm like, okay, well, I made it in massage school. So I kind of settled there. Like, I can just do that, even though I had this hunch that maybe I wanted to go further, but I didn't, because I didn't trust that I could make it. And so sometimes I hold myself to this brutal standard and I really judge myself. And I just assume everyone else is holding me to it. And to judge myself, I use external evidence of what is going on around me to compare on my work, to compare myself for how I'm judging myself. And that just doesn't, I mean, I've come a long way since I used to do that. But back then, it just, obviously doesn't feel good for anyone. No one wants to be judged. And I didn't mean to consciously judge sometimes my friends, my colleagues, peers, but it was how my nervous system was interacting in the world at the time. I would over prepare, I would make myself smaller and neater so there was nothing for anyone to catch. And it just is a huge energy leak and actually pushes people away because, again, no one wants to be judged. And it wasn't as if I was judging them to put them down. I was judging them to make myself feel better. But still, no one feels good doing that. And I really want to be honest about that because I hear a lot of coaches talking about this rag to riches story. And that's just not my story. And I'm not going to pretend it is. I grew up in a family where we were middle class and my parents both were entrepreneurs, and there was times where money was really tight and my parents had a lot of arguments over money, and we have gone through some really hard times as a family, and I've gone through trauma as a kid. And my dad was an alcoholic and he's been in AA now for several years, and so we really went through some struggles. But I did grow up privileged where I went to good schools and I did have help in undergrad. Yes, I did work. In fact, I got my first job at 15 as a gymnastics coach because there was some struggle in our family and I just wanted to have some money for myself so I could have some more freedom. And I remember being dropped off at the YMCA for my first job, and it was against my parents' wishes because they wanted me to, instead working for a jumping company, they wanted me to help out at home more, but I just really wanted my own money. So I went against their wishes and did their own thing. But it's not a true rags to riches story. And again, I did when I started my business. I didn't have any savings. I was let go of my job at the time, and I just couldn't put myself in another mill scenario of working for someone else and my schedule being controlled of, how I could work with people being controlled of, having to bill to insurance if I didn't want to work with insurance. I wanted to attract my ideal type of client, and I just wanted more control over a lot of things. So even though I didn't have any savings because I was just coming off maternity leave and my daughter was only 4 or 6 months old, I decided to go off out on my own. And I was profitable in that first year. I did pay the expenses that first year in my business and the bills, but I still had my husband's support because I wasn't living by myself. I wasn't a single mom. I used his and utilized his health insurance, which I'm extremely grateful for because that is how they caught my rectal cancer. Just that was within the first full year of my business in 2017. I started in the second half of 2016, or I guess first year and a half of business. So there was some bootstrapping going on, but I did have support. And I'm saying this because you might hear rags to riches stories. You might come from privilege. You might have had it good your life, and entrepreneurship feels really hard, and it is, but it can truly change you. And maybe you did come from nothing and have really pulled yourself up and have created success in a way that no one else in your family has created success for themselves. And I applaud you, and I find that so courageous. My coach, who's 30, and she's a woman of color, she just amazes me, like, for her age, for what she's created, from the place that she's come, has created so much for myself. And I find that so admirable. But I also need to own my story too. And you need to own yours. And here's the thing that took me a really long time to understand. Even with all of that, parents who really tried their best, even though they really struggled, going to good schools, having help to get to undergrad. Now, I was responsible for grad school, and my parents, I did work through all of undergrad, but I did have help for them. Grad school, I had no help. Even through all of that, I still never felt worthy. And because of that, that's part of the reason why I've worked my whole life. The only time where I've never worked was before I was 15, and then the 3 months of maternity leave I took with my daughter, which was amazing. And because I had her late in life at 36 years old, I was so ready to just give everything towards this tiny little baby. And I was just meant, a lot of times I hear moms not feeling prepared or ready, but because I had her late in life, that wasn't my experience. I felt so not prepared, but so ready to give my time and energy and focus to her and have her be the focus of my life. And I've carried that through. Now she's turning 11 just this week. And maybe I do that a little too much, but she will always know that she was my focus and my priority. And I will never regret her knowing that. But I worked not because I had to survive necessarily, because in high school, I probably didn't need to work. There was probably some times in college, an undergrad, where I didn't need to work, but I did. I worked 3 jobs. There was a couple summers where I worked 3 jobs. I opened a gym at 5 a.m. I then worked at a camp, and then I even worked at the Y as a personal trainer. And so I would just go from one thing to the next. I didn't need to do that, but working was how I felt I earned the right to take up space. It was how I felt I was proving that I was worth something. If I was producing, I was useful. If I was good and people weren't critiquing or criticized, I was allowed to be there. And it was an unconscious deal that I made for myself. And I carried it through when I first started my business, overworking and not saying controversial things on Instagram. And I've learned so much since then. And when I look back, I probably could have gone further and faster, but that's not my story. It's not my set of circumstances. And I grew at a pace that my nervous system allowed. And now I feel that I'm growing faster. My nervous system is capable of that. So for yourself, it's taking a look and from a place of non-judgment or not non-criticizing, but noticing where your nervous system, where those edges are of how you're showing up because your nervous system is trying to keep you safe. Maybe you're the practitioner who won't post until the reel is perfect, or you have an offer built, but you won't put it into the world because it's not quite tidy enough yet, or you undercharge because you can't do the math, because some old part of you doesn't fully believe that you're worth the bigger number or that people will pay the bigger number with you, even though you see them paying other people, but they won't pay you the higher price. I have a client who, when she started working with me, told me that every time she posts, she's posting from this frantic, unmoored place, and it just makes her more dysregulated. I have another one who caught herself mid-class thinking, who said you could teach this? What do you even know? And she is experienced, decades of experience. And there's this one thread I hear over and over, especially from caregivers, the servers, the one who spent their whole lives taking care of everyone else. I struggled to just ask people to give me their money. Who would they, or why would they even come to me? Why do they need to see me? What really differentiates me from anyone else out there doing similar type of work? All of this is not a strategy problem. You are not alone. I'm bringing this because so you can start to have awareness. Awareness is always the first step to change. And you guys know I love strategy. But if we're not having this awareness of what's going on underneath, you just keep hitting a wall with the strategy where you know the strategy, but you either avoid the strategy and try to do a long detour around it, or you spend time and money creating fancy funnels, for example, to avoid the real thing going on of you just are afraid to talk with people out in the world and tell them exactly what it is that you do and name your price. And some of that, it just distances us from our ideal clients. And our ideal clients might pick up on it in ways that they don't even understand. For example, they might see your post on Instagram and be like, oh, that sounds nice. Maybe I'll work with her someday. They're not having the thought, oh, I need to work with her now, right? There's a difference. Or they might look at your post and be like, oh, okay, that's good, but they're not magnetically drawn to it. But here's the truth, it is so edgy, but people lean towards the real. In fact, on Instagram right now, if we've learned anything from the Jessie Jean Yap challenge, I'm actually transparently in it and I really love it. And her ability to show up authentically and courageously in front of so many people. And I've been on Instagram since the beginning. I've never seen the internet or Instagram talk about one person so positively over and over again through many different like other creators just saying, I'm in the Yep Challenge, or I've seen, Jessie Jean make $1.2 million in her first launch, things like that. And it's remembering that, and she says this in her challenge, the account that she has now is not her first account. She didn't grow overnight. She is transparent about that. And she practiced and learned and developed the skill of yapping through doing it on this account and her previous account, and studying and learning and failing. And that's why I joined, for all those reminders, so I can continue to show up and push myself and be more real, be more authentic. Instead of, if you can see some of my reels, I'm really stiff, and that's not the real me. I'm just, my nervous system is dysregulated sometimes when I'm doing a talking head, which is why I err more on the sides of B rolls. So I can try to be more natural, try to be more my authentic self and have my personality come through more. So that is what I'm working on this year, to get more reach, connect with people in different ways, is adding in more talking heads, continuing with the B-roll, but continuing to explore and have my real authentic self come in. You get to see this more too through the rebrand. The feeling that I really want to create for the practitioner who lands on my website, who lands on my Instagram, who hears on the podcast, is that they can take a deep breath and be like, oh, someone's got me. I feel like I was overworking. I'm exhausted. I'm overwhelmed in my business. I don't know what to do. And she understands me. I'm in the right place. They take a sigh of relief. They feel hope. They feel that they're in a calm, grounded space of someone who's holding space for them to achieve. And it doesn't have to be perfect, and it can be simple. That is what I want to create for the practitioner. And through the rebrand and the self-identity work of really identifying where I hold myself back and that authentic nature doesn't come through, that is what I'm working on expressing more freely now. And so here's what it looks like for the person who feels ready. My client Marina, she just raised her rates this year, and her nervous system spoke up. She's in the 100K blueprint. We had many conversations on the path for horror, making sure it felt aligned, because she had a path of a phone call to an eval to session by session, and felt like it was a step back to bring in consultations, which is fine, right? You got to honor the pathway of what feels natural for you and the way that your clients interact and move through their client journey for your business. But it was raising her price and starting to sell more packages so she can move into the next phase of business. And she did it. And I loved waking up one morning and I received one text from her, one message from her. Oh, geez. Speaking of transparently, I'm also a klutz. If you're watching this on YouTube, you might have seen this, but I just knocked over my water bottle, which then knocked over my essential oil diffuser and my phone. Okay. And it was all an effort to get my phone so I could actually just read you the exact words of what she sent me. So you can celebrate her. She's a physical therapist and she works with moms to be and postpartum moms. And, with working on that client journey of someone finding her on Instagram, for example, being colder to her world, then moving through that initial phone screen to then the evaluation, and then to a prenatal and postpartum package. So all in one. And so she sent me a message saying, I sold my first prenatal and postpartum package. And then later that day, just 1 hour later, she sends me a message, just sold a second package to a pre-existing client. So excited. And then just a day or two later, she says, and I just booked a patient who's been following me on Instagram for a while. So it can happen when we start to step into this new identity, right? You could be plugging along slowly and slowly and slowly, and then all of a sudden you're released, you're free, and then it starts happening quicker. That's what happened for me. It can happen on Instagram. It can happen through consults. It can happen in different phases of your business in different ways. So if you're finding yourself tidying or freezing or overworking a post into a 3 hour ordeal when it really could take 20 minutes or less, This is all the same animal. And the only trick I've ever found is to just start to show up anyways, not perfectly, but courageously, and learning how to find that courageous in your body or confidence or whatever motivates you. Sometimes for me, it's just a place of service, an emotion that moves you so you can still feel the fear. You might feel the stuck, you might feel the frozenness, you just might feel the ickiness, but you have another emotion in your body as well that can motivate and push you forward. And then it's the work again. This is why I do the manifest and move of processing and metabolizing through the uncomfortable emotions and beginning to embody the person that you're becoming along the way. And we're just doing this over and over again in different phases of our business, right? Sometimes we think, oh, okay, well, I'll hit my first six figures and then I'm going to feel great in my business and I'm going to become someone new. But the truth is, you do, right? You do become someone new. But it sometimes you don't realize you're someone new because when you get there, we're on to the next goal, or there's a new problem that shows up in the business, or it's such gradual shifts that it's not till we pause and look back and be like, oh my gosh, I've come so far. So it's all these things of embodiment, processing, acknowledging, awareness, celebrating, pausing, looking back. And all of this is creating more evidence to keep going and make it sustainable for ourselves to continue to show up in these hard ways, these difficult ways. And also knowing that it can be simple. Sometimes it's just, you can just show up. I have a client, she showed up to a graduation and was just talking to moms there and got a couple clients. So when we show up and we're just us and we're connecting, that's all we need. And that is truly what unbound means for me. It's not just being unbound from the only way you make money is through having people in your office on the treatment table or on the calendar or using your physical body or being stuck in the traditional healthcare role and model. It is being unbound from all that, but is also being unbound from the nervous system that was trying to keep you safe and looking out for your best interest, but actually it was keeping you small. And so for me personally, it's being unbound from being the chameleon, being unbound from fear of judgment and criticism and perfection. So that's what I have for you today. So if you are feeling stuck, just keep going. One small step every day with that emotion that you want to feel. Of course, if you want coaching on this, that's what I'm here for, either one-to-one or in the 100K online program. But you've got this. You can do this. I totally believe in you. If I can do this, if I can create a 40K plus month, when I used to really struggle to just bring in 3 to 5K, you can too. All right. I'll see you next week. Bye for now.